No. Well, probably not. Let's talk about it. So episode 4 of season 26 just came out.
Oh my god, bro.
Oh, hell no, man.
Okay, it actually came out almost 2 weeks ago, but I'm a busy person who has very important stuff to do, like play Rocket League.
So they're advertising craft beer too, which means probably like beer trucks, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, they're
Oh my god.
Oh. Pinch.
Oh my god. Oh.
But I did watch this new episode, of course, and I immediately noticed that it felt kind of familiar. The topic for this episode is the rise in AI technology, more specifically ChatGPT, the chat tool that has been breaking the internet recently and has everyone asking just how close we are to human work becoming irrelevant. It's possible that even entertainers and creators could be replaced one day by this technology, and it's clear that South Park wanted to see just how possible it is, since the ending of this episode is entirely written and voiced by AI. Now, why would I make such a bold accusation in the title of this video? Well, it was mostly for clickbait. But about a month ago, I made a video where I used ChatGPT to write a South Park video essay. I also used a voice cloning software to do the entire narration for me, and it was pretty convincing. In fact, so convincing that you probably didn't even realize that this entire intro hasn't used my real voice at all. I've used the voice cloning to— nah, I'm just kidding. It really is me. Or is it? But yes, this new episode is very similar to what I did in that video a month ago. So did South Park steal this idea from me? Nah. When huge innovations in technology are made like this, it's kind of the natural outcome to test just how far it's come, especially if you're someone that creates things. It wasn't really my idea in the first place. It's not like I was the first person to do it. There have been countless other creators that have tried to recreate their videos using this technology. Do I think it's possible that Trey Parker saw my video and was inspired by it? Yeah, I mean, it's technically possible that he saw my video that only had 60,000 views and it inspired the episode, but I think it's far more likely that he just saw all the news about AI and came up with the same idea that every other creator did. But this episode, similarly to my video, most definitely answers the question of whether AI will be taking our jobs anytime soon. The answer is, we still have a long way to go. But this video is going to be much more than just an episode review. Throughout it, I'm going to talk about some of the craziest new AI technology we have seen to date, and hopefully I can show you just how far we've come in such a short time frame. Oh yeah, and of course I'll be giving my opinion on the episode too, so stick around for that. So this episode begins with Bebe raving to the other girls about how romantic Clyde is in his responses to her texts. Wendy is upset because according to her, Stan only ever responds to her texts with a thumbs up emoji. This was pretty hilarious to me because when she said this, I was expecting like, emoji responses at the very least, but then they show their text and Stan is literally just using the thumbs up like reaction thing to the message. It's like quite literally the least effort you could put into responding to a text message, and it reminded me of this meme. So Stan goes to ask Clyde how he is so good at responding to Bebe, and Clyde tells him that the secret is ChatGPT.
ChatGPT, dude. ChatGPT?
He just asked the AI to respond for him, and he doesn't even have to think about it at all. It's also pretty funny to see just how dismissive Clyde is about Bebe's messages. Like, he definitely doesn't care about them in any way, but Bebe thinks he does because he's just getting ChatGPT to reply to all of them.
It's super easy and convenient, and it saves me a ton of time because she texts me so goddamn much. Jesus Christ!
So Stan decides to take Clyde's advice, and we get a montage of him using ChatGPT to respond to Wendy. We see him doing absolutely everything besides actually paying attention to any of the text while letting ChatGPT do all the work. This makes Wendy very happy, believing that Stan is finally being genuine and that he truly cares about her. Of course, as the viewer, we can see that Stan is not even reading what Wendy is saying or how the bot replies, since he's doing much more important things like playing video games or napping in a lawn chair, I guess. Stan first gets a taste of the potential consequences of this when Wendy calls and asks him for the bedtime story that he promised to write, but he just gets ChatGPT to write it for him anyways, so he's all good. At school, as the kids are getting their essays back, Mr. Garrison shows how only a few essays got good grades, and as he reads off the incredibly high-level thesis from Clyde and Butters, Stan immediately realizes their secret. But what really seals the deal is the fact that even Cartman got a good grade on his essay with a topic that seems a bit fishy knowing his character.
This one's called A Feminist Neoliberal Perspective of Post-War Afghanistan by Eric Cartman.
They all head to the bathroom together where Cartman is pissed that someone told Stan about ChatGPT. The conversation essentially becomes Cartman warning them not to tell anyone else about it, since Mr. Garrison will find out. Oh yeah, and
Because once you bring girls into things, they're gonna ruin it. Just like slavery.
well, it's a shame that the boys didn't get to use the new version of ChatGPT that came out 6 days after this episode, because the improvements in technology are massive. For example, in one of the demos, this dude wrote his idea for a website on a piece of paper, took a picture of the paper, and gave it to ChatGPT, which then created the code for the website. He copy and pasted it into HTML and had a fully functioning website in 30 seconds flat. Or how about the people that have recreated entire video games like Pong and Snake in less than a minute by asking ChatGPT to make it for them? Or perhaps most terrifyingly, how about the researchers that wanted to see if it could pass one of those "I am not a robot" CAPTCHAs? So they gave GPT-4 a small budget and access to TaskRabbit, which is a website where you can hire people to do things for you. And GPT-4 not only got in contact with someone and asked them to complete the CAPTCHA, but lied and said they were a human with a visual impairment when asked if they were a robot by the worker. So essentially, this robot was able to hire a real person and successfully lie to them about being a robot so that they could get through the CAPTCHA that a robot can't pass. Now, if you're scared at this point, don't worry, it only gets worse. So now we're with Mr. Garrison, who's sitting at home grading papers. Interestingly, he is still with his boyfriend Rick from the previous season, and if you watched my Psychology of Garrison video, you would know why that's surprising. He's complaining about how long and well-written the essays are, and Richard tells him about ChatGPT. Garrison gets excited when he realizes that he can use it to grade the papers for him, and the fact that the papers themselves were written by ChatGPT goes completely over his head. Meanwhile, Stan begins to realize the error of his ways when he goes out for ice cream with Wendy and actually has to talk to her without the help of ChatGPT. He finds out pretty quickly, as Wendy begins to imply some pretty heavy stuff that she thought Stan had experienced himself thanks to ChatGPT.
For so long to tell anyone what happened to me when I was 6.
Yeah.
When you said the same thing happened to you, I couldn't believe it. Were you home when it happened?
Yep.
Watching Stan try to lie his way through this conversation while having absolutely no context is hilarious, and it was probably my favorite part of the episode, especially when he starts talking about boating accidents in Switzerland and things happening with his cousins. It was just good stuff. Stan is able to find a way out of the conversation and thinks he's in the clear, until back at school, Mr. Mackey reveals that they're going to be using a company to look for AI work. The boys go back to the bathroom to discuss, and Clyde and Stan are far more concerned with their girlfriends finding out than they are with actually getting in trouble. Because they think that if they get caught using this AI technology, then their girlfriends will assume they've been using it for texting. And of course, Cartman reminds them of his golden rule.
I told you that once you bring women into things, they ruin it just like they did slavery.
Since Mr. Garrison is also using it to grade papers, he tries to go to Mr. Mackey and stop them from analyzing the papers. Surprisingly, he actually makes a few good points.
Oh, what are people afraid of? That Hollywood is going to become just a bland recycling of old ideas? It already is. AI might help it.
Just then, the quote-unquote technician coming to detect the cheating arrives, and I thought this dude's character was hilarious. He's designed like some sort of shaman, and he goes around using methods that are reminiscent of like your stereotypical spiritual healer, like sprinkling these little sparkles on things and following what I think is a falcon. I'm not a bird expert, so cut me some slack, but as my boy Johnny Tucello said in his video, I don't think this is a reference to anything in particular. They probably just thought it would be funny to contrast how advanced this new technology is by detecting it with all these ancient techniques that are about as far from technology as you can be, and I personally found it to be really funny. So with this dude on the loose, it is now Stan's mission to make sure that he doesn't find out that he's been using ChatGPT. Man, it's a good thing there's no AI mind-reading technology yet, or Stan would definitely be screwed. What's that? Oh no. Okay, well, bad news for Stan. Thanks to a recent study over at Osaka University, we're a lot closer to mind reading than we thought. Researchers were able to build a database of brain scans by having 4 participants look at 10,000 images and taking fMRIs while they looked at these images, essentially creating a map of how the brain reads these images. They then fed all of these brain scans into a stable diffusion AI, which is used to create images, and it learned how to read and translate these brain scans and figure out what the image was that the person was looking at just by looking at the brain scan. So then they gave new MRIs to the same participants while they looked at a specific image. And then those MRIs were fed into the now trained AI, which is able to use its knowledge to not only figure out what they were looking at, but recreate it with its AI image generation. And the results are kind of terrifying. So essentially, this AI can pretty accurately recreate what you are thinking of by just taking a scan of your brain. Now, I will say this sounds worse than it really is. For this to function in any way, it would need a massive database of brain scans for the person you'd be doing it to. So it seems like we're still pretty far from AI just being able to recreate the images in our head. I mean, it's not like there's going to be some way for companies to gather massive databases of the brain activity of the general public anytime soon. And even if they did, these companies would never use this data maliciously, like selling it to advertisers or even giving it to the government, causing breaches of our privacy that would make George Orwell roll over in his grave. No, they would never do something like that. So Stan decides to go to Garrison to come clean about his AI use so that he can avoid getting in trouble. But Mr. Garrison seems to only hear the part where he says you can use it for text messages, and he realizes that his boyfriend Rick has been using it. He is enraged, but nothing else really comes of it in this episode, so maybe it's setting up for another episode. Meanwhile, the shaman guy finds a phone with AI writing on it using his bird, and of course the phone is Wendy's, and Stan knows that it's his text messages that got Wendy caught. So the shaman dude starts interrogating Wendy, and Stan tries to come up with a way to solve this. He decides that the best way to do that is to ask ChatGPT. What follows is a completely AI-generated ending to the story, complete with AI voices and a very uninspired resolution. Stan gives an ending speech that quickly ties up the plot as efficiently as possible without anyone suffering any real consequences. It is so tidy and generic, it kind of gives me Uncanny Valley vibes, and it really just feels very unnatural. Especially when all the characters read their lines like it's a bad anime dub from the 90s.
I will find these tech companies who are trying to use OpenAI for their own games, and I will stop them.
For me, the funniest part of this ending sequence was definitely Mr. Mackey and Cartman's lines. Now, I suspect that these lines weren't actually written by AI since they were just too perfect, because their lines just perfectly capture the generic broad spectrum of AI writing, just generalizing their entire characters into these lines.
Guns are buying, okay?
Ah, screw you, you dumb Jew!
The episode concludes with Stan telling Wendy that sometimes a thumbs up from a human is better than an AI-generated lie. And then Clyde asks Stan how he was able to pull it all off, and Stan responds pretty appropriately.
You pull all that off. ChatGPT, dude.
For the fourth time in a row, we got another pretty solid episode. There were a ton of moments that I didn't even mention that were absolutely hilarious, and I think it did a really good job of highlighting how we still have a long way to go before AI is taking our jobs.
Hey, take your job! Take your job!
One thing that I found interesting is that this episode didn't really have any writing credits for Matt Stone, as well as a very small amount of characters using his voice. It makes me wonder if he's just sick and taking a break, or if something else is going down at South Park Studios. Most likely the first option, but who knows. Placing it into my ranking list, it's going near the top of B tier in the 150th spot, and it is continuing our quest for the best season in years. Okay, for real this time, there is not going to be any jokes about Pip. You can watch all the way to the end of the video, but seriously, there is not going to be anything there. I don't know why you're still here. There's not going to be anything. I'm telling you, it's not going to happen.